Good evening, good evening, good evening, good evening, good morning, good afternoon, wherever in the world you are. Welcome, welcome, welcome. To those on YouTube, thank you so much for joining us. And for those on Facebook, listen, we are so happy that you are with us tonight. So I am Sharika Anderson, the CEO of iEvolve Global. And just in case you have never ever heard about us, that's okay. Let me give you a little bit of information. So at iEvolve Global, one of our core is our unwavering commitment to empowering individuals and enabling them to break out of limitations, to evolve and become the best version of themselves. Now, as you can see, we are very dedicated to bridging the gap, the significant gap in mental health awareness and understanding, and we're also committed to providing the tools that are necessary for persons who are navigating these realities. So, again, thank you so much for taking the time out to be with us tonight. Our topic tonight is Echoes of Fatherlessness. Now, this month, earlier this month, we celebrated Father's Day, and guess what? Persons are always complaining that fathers don't get enough attention. So we are making sure that we do something to commemorate Father's Day. We are making sure that at iEvolve Global, our fathers don't feel left out. And so tonight, we are going to be looking at that. We are talking about the echoes of fatherlessness. And when you hear that, what I hope comes to mind, I don't know what comes to mind for you, but what I hope comes to mind is the different implications of being in a household where there is fatherlessness or, existing without a father. But I don't need to say much more because we have experts tonight who are going to break it down. Listen, so much has been happening behind the scene, but we are still having mindful conversation tonight. Now, before I introduce them to you, listen, before I introduce them, all three of them to you, just go ahead, like, share, and comment. Share with somebody because somebody needs to hear this very insightful conversation tonight. No, enough from me. You don't need to hear anything else from me. I'm just your host. But we have three men, three experts who are going to be taking us through tonight. All right, so let's meet them.
Samuel McDermott has a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's in counseling psychology with an emphasis in education. He currently works as a therapist for the Department of Counseling Services in the Cayman Islands. Samuel uses a strengths-based approach in motivating clients to recognize and utilize their existing resources to live the best version of themselves. Samuel also has specialized training in trauma-sensitive care and is a certified EMDR therapist. His personal mantra is free your mind and everything else will follow.
All right, welcome Samuel. For our viewers, I know you look different in the picture, but I can guarantee you it's the same Samuel with the expertise and the knowledge. It's the same Samuel. Hi Samuel, how are you doing?
I'm good. I just had to check my birth paper to make sure. So yeah, it's me. It's me. Good
Well,
night, everyone.
I'm happy you confirmed it. Birth papers don't lie. Happy to have you.
Jason
Yeah.
Winter hails from Kingston, Jamaica. He holds master's and PhD degrees in counseling psychology from Northern Caribbean University, NCU, and a postgraduate diploma in education and training from the Vocational Technical Development Institute, VTDI, and certificate in substance use and research methodology, Center for Addiction and Mental Health, CAM, Toronto, Canada. Presently, Dr. Winter serves as Associate Professor and Chair of the Department of Behavioral and Social Sciences at Northern Caribbean University, Jamaica. As a licensed counseling psychologist and educator, DR, Winter conducts numerous presentations, psychological assessments, and trainings, and has published on mental health-related topics, and has served as radio host on mental health programs. Additionally, he is the lead, mental health and psychosocial support 9 MHPSS, volunteer with the Jamaica Red Cross. Dr. Winter is married to Stephanie Christopher, PhD, and together they have a son, Kyle, and daughters, Kayla and Kylie. Dr. Winter is a firm believer in Jesus Christ as his Lord and Savior.
Hello, hello, hello.
Dr. Winter.
Good to
We
be
are
the
so happy to see you. Thank you so much for joining us. Listen, we are excited about tonight. We are having a very important conversation, and we are grateful that we have well competent persons to share with us. The third panelist, Romando, he was on, but he's having technical challenges because there seems to be a storm in New Jersey. But we are going right ahead because we have a lot to discuss tonight. Closer down, we'll also have a testimonial, someone who has been, who is accustomed to having a father around. We want to hear from her perspective and her experience, so that can add some depth to our conversation. All right, gentlemen, let's go right in. I want to start our conversation tonight with an article that was written by Dr. Abrahams. And this is from 2018, but I'm sure if we could talk to Dr. Abrahams tonight, he would say the very same thing. So the article says our country is facing a crisis. We are in turmoil. Crime, especially violent crime, is out of control. The aggression, anger, and frustration among our populace is obvious and distressing. When crime fighting measures are discussed, there is a tendency for us to focus on steps taken to apprehend criminals, such as raids, curfews, and state of emergencies. We tend to dwell on measures, punitive measures, often failing to identify contributing factors to the a real issue. What Jamaicans need to understand is that fatherlessness is one such factor, and that the issue is far more critical than the majority of us realize. So, Dr. Abraham seems to be alluding to the fact that fatherlessness is contributing to the state of affair or current reality as a nation. And so let's start there. What are our perspective on this? Is this something that we can identify with? Let's start with Sir McDermott.
Well, yes. I hadn't read the article and good evening again, everyone. Good evening, Dr. Winter. And I hadn't read the article myself, but I am inclined to agree with him. Fatherlessness definitely has a heavy impact on the society, Jamaican society, um, Black American society, anywhere in the world that there are high rates, and we'll get into that, high rates of fatherlessness. It definitely will have an impact. I am grateful for this conversation because hopefully, while it is that we're discussing fatherlessness, the fathers who are listening will get an opportunity to see how impactful they are in the lives of the persons of the children that they almost said children that they serve, but the children that they're fathers to. So we're not going to just speak only about absences, but we're also going to speak about the positive impact of fathers who are present. I also wanted to frame the discussion around what it is that a fatherlessness is. So, fatherlessness is the absence of a father from the home. And it's not just physical absence, because you actually, if you speak to some mothers, they will say that they're in households with fathers who are present but absent. So the fathers are there, but the impact and the presence is not felt in some situations. And that's absence and that's fatherlessness as well. Now, in terms of how it is caused, or what are some of the contributing factors are. So apart from death, there is divorce. And we've had heightened divorce rates in the past couple of decades. Unfortunately, marriages aren't lasting as long as they usually do for some reason. And as a result of that, parents have become separated, and you have homes that have single parents. And even if it is that it hasn't gotten to the stage of divorce, you have fathers who are there who are not really there. Then there is births that are out of wedlock where marriage wasn't an institution. So as a result of that, the father is not there. There are also psychological factors, and I kind of wanted to zone in on this particular psychological factor before um, allowing Dr. Winter to answer as well. So substance abuse is an epidemic. Post COVID, we've seen a spike in mental health issues, unprecedented spike in mental health issues, and persons need an avenue to cope. Persons have turned to what we can call healthy coping strategies. So they've found support systems, they've turned to spirituality, they've become active, they've taken care of their health. But others have not had that opportunity or have not had that privilege and have had to turn to substances to cope through challenging times. Now, turning to substances, while it numbs the pain and the realities that are present, it also numbs the potential to be present and to be mindful and to be active. And that's one very significant psychological perspective that contributes to fatherlessness.
All right, hold on. So Samuel, just give us like a 1 hour lecture in 3 minutes. So Dr. Winter, before you come in, let me just step back a little. So, so there's something that Samuel said that I want to flag, because sometimes when we think of fatherlessness, we only think of the physical absence. But Samuel, if I heard you correctly, you also alluded to being physically present but still absent. And I wanted to mention that because sometimes I think we don't understand the importance of being present emotionally, being present, psychologically, not just being there physically. And so I wanted to make sure that we heard that. So those persons listening will know that it's more than just having a male figure in the house. All right? We're going to definitely come back to that psychological coping statement. But let's hear from Dr. Winter.
Man, Matt Dermott, right on point. Fatherlessness, the echo. It goes back to probably each and every one of us listening. The impact of fatherlessness, the impact of the absence of that male, assertive, supportive, caring presence. I know we talk about father, we include what, that biological notion. Sure, you have given your genes, you have contributed to that, chromosomal development and so forth and so on. That's on one hand. We do have the adoptive father as well, so it might be fathers to non-biological children. But the fatherlessness or the echo thereof is something that is so important. Father absenteeism, some persons may also term it as. Essentially, when we look at the role of the father, or even likened it from malehood to begin with, I've come across these three P's kind of a concept: priest, provider, protector. And so the male within the household becoming the husband and ultimately may then become the father. Depending on your theoretical or your orientation in life, you may not go up through the ranks if it were to be a sequential approach as listed just now. But you might be very well a father and not be maritally joined, irrespective of your locality or jurisdiction that you are, listening or tuning into the conversation here. But we'll talk about carrying forth children and ultimately stepping back, giving no care or consideration to your role, your impact on that child or children, mean for some serious problem. In our educational institutions, sure, in our Jamaican context, and this may very well mirror other Caribbean realities or Latin American realities where we have a lot more female teachers, yes, in our schools than our male teachers. to help with that nurturing guidance, when we should even check within our schools how many of those children represent households where there are both parents. How many of those children represents households where there is a father present? I'm not saying, I'm sure we're going to get in the conversation where we say there's a male presence through the uncle, the grandfather, but if we should just hit the nail on its head and say father presence, full stop, we may very well be alarmed at the statistics that the fathers are not present. When I ask, okay, with the absence of the father, noting that there are three primary roles again that I like to see our fathers fulfill, that I say to myself, Jason, are you fulfilling this? Being the priest, being the provider, being the protector. And are those functions being executed to the highest prioritization as they ought to be within the household? And certainly not just physical presence, providing, leading the priesthood of the family and protecting, but also being there emotionally. When last of our fathers held their child or their children and say, son, daughter, I love you. I'm proud of you. You have failed. You have fallen short of the expectations, of the guidance, the grooming that we have provided you as your father. But hey, come home. Like the prodigal son, it may be. I am waiting for you to give that nurture. So we live in a society where the impact of fatherlessness is serious, is grave. Later on in the conversation, we begin to look at the mental health issues, the impact that the absentee father leaves or fosters, self-esteem issues, substance use issues. Samuel hinted at. Yes, depression, anxiety issues, academic issues. Yes, domestic violence has a potential impact. So there's so much that we are needing to avert, to avoid, to save off. Because if we're not careful, if we increase our father absenteeism or fatherlessness, the echo thereof, we're in for some serious problem or continue to be in for some serious problems.
All right. Too many things to mention, but I
Right?
love the triple P. I love the triple P. I think that sums it up nicely, and that definitely our men can. I hope somebody's writing this down somewhere so you can send it to one of the males that you know and say, hey, this is the aim. This is the standard. Priest, provider, and protector, right? But I want us to go a little bit deeper because when we talk about absenteeism or fatherlessness, one of the things that we have often heard is that this is actually encouraged by cultural factors and this is promoted some way in our society. Some persons go as far back as slavery to say that, oh, our males were not allowed to have, one family. They moved around and they were studs. So what I would like to know, and I think that could help us out, is are there cultural and societal factors that could be contributing to the phenomenon of fatherlessness or absentee fathers?
Well,
I'm allowing you to choose. I'm allowing
Okay.
you to choose.
Well, so I'll speak to what I. By the way, Dr. Winter, I felt like I was in a lecture again. So
Oh wow.
I'll speak to what I have seen and I have heard as recent as a few weeks ago. So Father's Day. Whenever it comes, persons usually post their children, they post their fathers, etc. And we know the Jamaican term gelding, something that's said. Uh, the gelding truck, if you're on the gelding truck, meaning that you don't have a child, then yeah, it's kind of seen off as less than desirable. But unfortunately, the thing that is omitted from discussions around encouraging or enticing people or men to become fathers is the conversation surrounding the lifelong responsibility that entails. And we have this subculture where men are encouraged to have as much, and notice I said subculture, uh, men are encouraged to have as much children as possible. perhaps with as much women as they can. And if this happens, then they're seen as somebody who is great. Granted, this is a subculture and this is not pervasive in all the areas of society, but it does exist. And you would think that it's only quote unquote what we would call the lower class that this exists. But no, 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 no. Notice I said afford, if it is that you can afford it. So even persons who are wealthy and affluent, they're also encouraged that if they can afford it, then they should. And if you don't believe me, I won't call any names, but and this is not in our culture, but in Black American culture, there is a particular rapper who is rumored to have about 12, 13, 14 children with different baby mothers. And I've seen the conversation surrounding that if he can afford it, then he should.
Mhm.
But again, the absence that I'm seeing in this discussion is the consistent and sustainable responsibility. So while finances are present and can be present, presence have to be there too. So a father has to be able to be in the household, as Dr. Winter had said, to protect, to provide, and to be the priest. If you have split your responsibilities across several different baby mothers, several different households, how is that going to happen? And in order for us to step away from that, we have to reject that notion in society that just having children for the sake of having children is something to aspire to. So, that being said, that's one cultural factor that contributes to fatherlessness.
Thank you for that, Samuel. Dr. Winter, over to you.
Look here, cultures come and go. Culture varies. Cultures are modified. Cultures are created. And so, sure, that's a culture of slavery mechanism. And how long was this again? If you do the math, 300 years. What was there before? These fathers, these males taken to the Caribbean. What was family life before they were enslaved? Before our forefathers in the context were enslaved. What were our family history? And store and the kind of experience we're like. And so we can't say the genesis of us here in the Caribbean is linked just to studs. And so because of that, we see that real effect that it carries or it lingers. We have to change that and understand that but I certainly struggle with having three children, yes, and being able to individually give them the attention. When one will say, "Okay, Daddy," and I'm sure give stage and phase of life, they're all under adolescent period of development. And so when one begins to ask for attention, I don't want chips in, and I'm saying, "All right, Jason, how do I cater to each and for a certain nice goal to say when one is speaking one at a time, that kind of a thing." I struggle with three and being able to balance that in the one household, not having many with multiple women, but being there in that one household. Imagine then that man with the three or the four or the many in different households, in different communities. Presence is important. We appreciate the whole issue of life and development that we pass through this stage just once. So we pass through childhood once, adolescence once, young adult once, and we die. The stark reality is that 100 years from now, many of us will not be around. Put 100 years on my age, yeah? And so when you look at the legacy and the impact that you're creating, what are we fighting of ourselves for in this life but to love and protect and to offer that care and nourishment to the ones we have in the here and now? So the culture of having many or as many as you can is something that ought to be challenged and stop it essentially. Carry what you can financially. Children are expensive now, not just material provisions, but also fighting against the ills, the various political undertones that are around us, depending on your spiritual outlook, depending on your philosophical outlook. If you don't take that active role in owning and nurturing and providing for your children, males, and you leave it up to who? The women? You leave it up to who? The neighbors? You leave it up to who? Well, we are encouraging non productive citizens. And when we look at productivity, being able to relate one to the other respectfully, having reciprocal relationships, it's important that we are very active in our role. Take on that which you financially can afford with your presence, yes, your physical being there, so that our children, our fathers can see that many of us, yet again, may have grown up with our father not being there physically. And what do? You esteem to break that cycle. So this generational shift of ensuring that that nurturing and that care is there, and it has to start with you for sure.
All right. So thank you so much. Just to reiterate some of the things that we heard is that culture can play a factor. Um, we hear it in the media, we see it in the media, we hear it. Man to have enough gal and gal in a bungle, and of course with that come multiple children. But what we're hearing tonight is that this is not something that should be continued. We are encouraging that this is discontinued because of the implication. One of the things that was said, if I may put it my way, is that have what you can afford financially and emotionally. Dr. Winter said, "Listen, I have three, and I must confess, it's not the easiest thing, right?" So pay attention to what is being said tonight because it's the children that suffer. And then these children grow up, and then we all suffer. We all bear the blunt of it. So thank you so much. So indeed, there are cultural factors at play. Now, let's jump now to look at, if we can break it down nicer, the comparison. What is it like? What are some of the challenges that someone faces who grows up in a fatherless home versus somebody who grows up with a father who is not just there but is present? If I may use the three P's, is a priest, a provider, and a protector. Break it down for us. Help us to understand the differences. Somebody who has this versus somebody who doesn't. What are some of the challenges that they experience?
Go ahead, sir.
Firstly, one of the things that comes to my mind, that modeling, that role modeling, that children, your daughter, your sons, they're missing out on that. Home as a fundamental building block of our society. We want functional society. We want when we leave home and we go to our organization, we get the best customer care. We get the best approach to you. That doesn't just happen overnight and with good, sure, training and stuff. It starts from the home. So fatherless home, you'll create the potential for poor academic performance. Chances are. And once we have those who have rised above fatherlessness or father absenteeism and have done well, we can give kudos to the uncles, the grandparents, and even some females who take on fatherly roles. I know we're not going to go into the notion the mother who fathered me or the father who mothered me, that kind of a thing. We're going to get into those socio-political kind of discussion and what can and cannot happen. But the essence that when we do not have fathers in our homes, we're talking about the reduction in good interpersonal relationship modeling. So in the homes, the children can observe how a man treats and love his wife, his spouse. Again, going back to the P's, fundamental to our existence. We are seeing that the respect for law and order is so pivotal that when fathers are in home and being the priest and working with their spouses, so it's not the father above the mother kind of understanding, equality and fairness in relating, each understanding their role in the family. And so when a child or son and daughter can observe that, they're more likely to go forward. Yes, when we talk about healthy practices, not just hygiene. So the father is modeling how to eat properly, how to be able to focus and finish a task. The child is observing that and carries on. We hear about, again, looking at that emotional caring, conflict resolution.
Mhm.
Yes, when the father is able to observe or to demonstrate or role play to that child that mommy and I we disagree on something. I was upset, I was angry because something happened, and I did this, and I am effectively regulating my emotions. The child can see that and carries that on. So when we see a fatherless home now, we're talking about truancy and violence being to the fore, respect for authority. we have seen a breakdown in the morals in our homes, in our communities, in our schools, because there's no proper modeling taking place. Again, essentially, divorce and separation, or just lack of the presence of the father, poverty, developmental issues. We see persons relating to each other in a very aggressive side. So that increase in violence is something that we have to watch out for. So, in a nutshell, what am I saying here? A father present in the home doing those three pieces, and that's going to be one of the fundamental things that common line throughout my conversation here. Serving as a priest, spending time, spiritual upliftment. The child can see that. We talk about wellness. Wellness is not just physical doing good, the absence of any ailment, physical ailment, but it's also including the social. When we can see the father working with the mother, playing games, having games night, respecting when to take turns, how to respect differences during the playing of a game at home, and you don't throw down the thing and get upset and run out. But he said, no, son, I am upset. Mother win, let's cheer her on. Your sister win, let's cheer her on. So that modeling of effective interpersonal relationship is something positive. The absence of that, sure, without any intentional way to reproduce or substitute for that, that child will then have to go learn that somewhere else, and it may he or she may learn it the hard way or take longer to learn it. So we're talking about a child, a fatherless family, where you may have the child now being very truant, very disruptive, maybe increasing juvenile delinquency issues, non-academic performance because no need for prioritizing. So those are two ways we can see the differences in father present homes or father absent homes. And again, take in mind, it's not just physical presence, as Samuel alluded to, it's more mental presence in the home, which is crucial.
Thank you so much, Dr. Winter. That's a mouthful. Let's hear what Sir Samuel has to add.
I want to definitely piggyback on what Dr. Winter said about modeling. So what I'm about to say is not a rule of thumb. There can be exceptions to the rule, but you can often tell a woman who has not had a father figure in her life by what she accepts in the world of dating, what she accepts in her marriage, what she accepts in her relationships. You can also tell a male who has not had a positive male influence in his life by the way he treats a woman, treats the person who is dating, his relationships, his wife, the way he treats his own children, and the way he respects or disrespects himself. Uh, on the topic of modeling, if it is that you grow up in a household where you are seen, as Dr. Winter said, cooperation, conflict resolution, skills being actively displayed, and a father who is really standing up to his responsibilities, you're more likely going to want to identify with that father, especially if you have a good relationship with him, and reciprocate this when you have your own children, when you're in your own relationships, and when you're going about your own endeavors. Likewise, a woman who has seen a positive male influence and sees a father who has shown her by how he treats his wife what she's supposed to put up with and what she's to reject, that's very telling. That's going to be very telling. So right away you can see the differences. Father in the home, respect for self, high self-esteem, good modulation skills, self-regulation skills, a high threshold or a high bar for what I'll accept in relationships versus father not being present, possibly low self-esteem issues, possibly being exposed to violence, perhaps multiple other men coming into the household, or not a stable foundation for relationships. So you begin to accept anything or anyone or any standard. So that's one thing. I also wanted to zone in on the deep relational trauma that comes from the absence of a father. No, relational trauma is really when a relationship is destroyed, and by way of the relationship being destroyed, one, or somebody who is close to you, somebody who has you or you have them in some high regard, they've hurt you, embarrassed you, left you, discarded you, rejected you, abandoned you, that can cause deep attachment wounds, that can cause hurt, that can cause pain. And funny enough, even though this may have happened from childhood, father has left, and you felt that deep attachment wound from the absence of a father, we're talking about echoes. Echoes, you say something and it reverberates. It echoes that attachment wound, it echoes and it reverberates even into your adulthood. I'm in a relationship, and being in a relationship, there is a disagreement. And because there's a disagreement, I don't want to lose this person. And logically, I'm thinking, all right, this is a simple disagreement. So I'm not going to lose them just over a simple disagreement. But what happens is that that child remembers that, all right, there was a disagreement in the home and father left. I need to cling, I need to people please, I need to ensure that I do whatever this person says so that this person does not leave. Conversely, not having a good father figure. Remember, we spoke about a father being present but not being really present. A father who is there, who is not treating the mother how she's to be treated. I see that if it is that I want a woman to stay, I need to be abusive. If it is that I want a woman to be present and I feel triggered by something, I feel insecure in myself in some way, and my insecurities tell me that this person is not good enough for me, I'm going to coerce her into staying by any means possible. We spoke about modeling earlier, and these are some examples, some very horrible examples that we can learn if it is that a father figure is not present. And we've seen how this can trickle into how it is that we relate to persons in the future.
Um, wow. I want us to stay there a little in terms of the long term implication. The long term implication. You talked about it a little, and I think Dr. Winter also alluded to it. But as we talk about the echoes, I'm hearing it because this is manifesting in the workplace, it is manifesting in church, it is manifesting in relationships, it is manifesting in the community. And so you talk about that deep emotional wound that persons experience when they experience fatherlessness. Can we talk a little bit more about that? Because one of the things I vividly recall, my father does not know his father. And even as a big man, big old man, the other day, him asking me if I can help him find his father. And that really brought home that it's almost as if there's this longing, there's this void that never gets filled. So can we talk about that a little? That void, that inner desire that persons who grow up not knowing their father or having a father that wasn't the priest, the provider, and the protector, that gap that leaves them to navigate.
So I mean, it's really a touching topic because that void, it doesn't go away until there is closure. No, closure doesn't necessarily mean that you have to speak to the father and say, "Daddy, why you left me?" or have a conversation with the father about it. That does not have to happen because in some instances, father is probably not here, not on this plane of existence, dead, and that's not possible. But closure still has to happen. And a way in which closure can happen is reparenting that inner child that has been wounded. So whenever before we even begin to reparent, just think about your child that you have. If you're going to reparent, if you're going to parent a child that you have to be present. You have to notice what the child is doing that's wrong, what the child is doing that's right. What's wrong, you correct them, and what's right, you congratulate them. It's the same thing with noticing and reparenting your inner child. You have to be self-aware. You have to notice what the triggers are and recognize that it is something that's from the past. As I said before, it's an echo of the past. It's not present here and now, so this must be my inner child. Let me give an example. Um, I'm in a relationship, again, in a relationship, and my partner decides that she is going to say something very critical to me. right? And after saying something very critical, she decides to go and spend the night with her parents, her family or her friends or whatever. And I know, yes, that's painful, but I know start to feel a very deep pain that reminds me of, yeah, when I was younger, I used to be criticized heavily. And when I was criticized heavily, I was seen as if I'm not good enough. I was seen as if my efforts are not necessary, my efforts are not worthy, my efforts are not necessary, and I am not necessary. And for some persons, it may even be verbal rebukes in the sense of, you're not good for nothing, your workless, like we know that Jamaican term, well, your workless, like etc. etc. That deep wound, that deep rejection of your purpose, rejection of who you are, rejection of who you can be. That comes back in that moment when you hear that criticism from your partner. And sometimes, yes, we do need to, that's a different thing that we do need to address. So it is that we resolve conflicts with our partners, but also reparenting the inner child by saying to the inner child, you're not worthless. You are loved. You are enough. You are capable. You are needed. You are wanted. When we see these echoes, when we see these reverberations of wounds, we need to speak to it. We need to communicate with it. We need to reparent our inner child.
All right, thank you, Samuel. Dr. Winter, anything to add here?
Well, I love the points mentioned by Samuel. The impact that will have is not just today, but tomorrow. Certainly, that longing, that void. I look at the natural, well, I think of the natural life existence. And sure, man, woman comes together, conceive to the process or contribute to the process. Child comes forth, child is in that space where man and woman serving as those nurturing, modeling factors. Train the child in the path in the way in who's going. When he's old, he will not depart from it. Now, when that begins to be broken down or begins to be pulled left and right, we're in for problems. And that's what we're saying here. The lack of that father presence, and sure that reparenting and that coaching and that support that can be provided by a mental health practitioner in terms of father absenteeism and breaking the cycle. I can recall even in my own experience having my father there at some point in time, physically in the home, and then at another point in time, not physically being there, and how that difference will cause my reacting or acting out at school, and know how conscious I am as a father to say, I will endeavor to be present at all times. If there are disagreement between husband and wife, how I can work that out so that it doesn't impact them. Because I know as an adult, my child may very well have difficulties maintaining relationships because he has not seen how it is properly modeled. I have seen children, late adolescents, and I thought late adolescents, I'm saying 40, well, 15 going up to 17, having difficulty forming trusting relationships because lack of a father. And I know it gets even difficult when we look at the other element of mental health issue. There's a particular mental health concerns like reactive attachment disorder, where children who don't form those early relationships with their caregivers, yes, ideally to include both parents, mother and father, in those early relationships not being formed, how they become difficult later on trusting. So they may find themselves in the workplace becoming paranoid, yeah, leading to personality disorders, having narcissistic ideologies, borderline personalities, paranoid, and it goes maybe even into some level of psychosis. Because the mind then becomes weighed down with who am I? What am I? My purpose. And how that purpose and your being is formed and shaped by your nurturing caregivers from the early onset. If you don't build a house in the right way, chances are you're going to have problems later on. And if you don't care and nurture a child in the right way, you're going to have problems later on. Why do we have so many criminal activities, delinquency? And delinquency and criminal activities is not just, we call it white collar and blue collar kind of crime. Yeah. So whether you look at the man stealing in the organization or the one cutting or scamming or engaging in certain um, illegal practices, go back to the genesis and find out what is happening here. That parenting, that nurturing. And sure, I know some will tell us, yeah, they had all of that and they still go and do certain activities. That's a possibility, because at the end of the day, the power of choice cannot be taken from a man or a woman, cannot be taken from I. And so you may be given all the good things, but yet still choose a particular pathway. Sure, I accept that. But the fact is, the presence of the Father in the scheme of life and its unfolding, both parents coming together, provide that nurturing care, and the child models and repeats that in the cycle of life. The absence of that creates some hiccups. So there's the adverse childhood issues, there's the reactive attachment issues that may very well later on. There are, in other psychological terms, we get into Eric Erickson speaks of psychosocial development, longing and belonging, identity crisis. All of those things then can shape, who am I? Why am I here? So it's important that we see that adverse childhood experiences may have consequences later on in adults. Talk about the trust and the esteem issues, talk about the paranoia issues, talk about the personality issues, talk about substance use issues, and other mental health issues can be linked because of that lack of nurturing by the father or by the mother. But while we're focusing on father absenteeism or the fatherlessness echo thereof, we need to break that cycle and ensure that our fathers are present emotionally, physically present to hug your child, to reassure your child, to stand by your child in difficult times, and to stand by your child in good times, so that that child can seek to pass that on to his or her own children, to their own children, absolutely.
All right, thank you, Dr. Winter. Listen, man, this feels like an entire course. So, Samuel, I don't know if you have any comment here. We're just going to piggyback on that. Dr. Winter spoke excessively about how fatherlessness can affect the child's development, emotionally, cognitive development, social emotional development. I don't know if you have anything to chime in here. One of the things we spoke about was this whole matter of identity. And so many persons are walking around unsure of who they are because, daddy was not there or a father figure was not there to say, hey, you are this. Don't let anybody tell you otherwise. You are valued, you are loved. So I don't know if you have something to add here in terms of how does not having that affects their overall development, cognitively, emotionally, or otherwise.
Well, as you said, I'm inclined to agree. Dr. Winter did just give a course, probably two courses. So not much to add, but I kind of wanted to shift the focus a bit on who is left to parent when the father is not there and how it impacts on the single parent's ability to actually be there fully for cognitive development, for professional development, for all the ways that a child can develop. So when a father is absent, we know what happens already. The responsibility is left on mother. Responsibility can be left on grandmother. Responsibility can be left on aunts, uncles, etc. But the fact is that the absence of a father leads to a strain in the dynamic of parent and child relationship. And if the single parent that's there is not fully able to take care of herself or their selves or whoever it is that's left, they're not fully able and has the full presence of mind to take care of themselves and a child or multiple children, then somebody is going to get left behind. Something will have to give, something will definitely have to give. And yes, again, what I'm saying is not a rule of thumb, because you do have persons who have developed really well coming from single parented households. But still, you have to ask yourself the question, what if it is that this person had a father who was present, a good father who was present? The leaps and bounds that they have made, maybe they would have been able to make even more. But yeah, when a father is absent and there's only one person left to carry the, another word escapes me, so I just have to say burden, the responsibility of child rearing, being unable to be fully present to take care of oneself is going to restrict the ability to be fully present to take care of your child.
I love that shift because sometimes when we're thinking about the echoes, we don't think about the remaining parent who has to work, discipline, help with homework, do all the house chores and all of that, and we don't think about how that also affects the parent. And sometimes it's not intentional that that particular parent become abusive or eventually become absent too, because now they have to bear so much responsibility and they're trying to hold the family together, trying to do so many things. And if we're not careful, that child ends up having no parent present, right? And so we have to be mindful of all the echoes that are associated with fatherlessness. All right, so we have talked a lot about impact, we have looked at causes. What I want to know now, where can we get help? Listen, I'm 50 years old. I had this experience. How, where, what? Help me out. How can I get help? Where are the resources?
All right. So, before we talk about getting help to what is happening to you, so for me, from the mental health perspective, if you reckon that you suffer with self-esteem and emotional regulations, you have trauma working on. You have things pressuring you left and right. You have your regrets. You have unforgiveness weighed up in your heart, burdening you down. You have your father. You know him. You know where he's at, but that kind of relationship or relational bonding is not there. Certainly, you got to get help for yourself to begin with. So you got to work through that unforgiveness. And some of you may not have had that closure. Your father may have passed. You may not even have known your father, other than he was once in the community, or whatever your reality is. Definitely talk with a mental health practitioner. So wherever you are, especially on the island of Jamaica, because I know you have persons streaming across the Caribbean or different location. I know in Jamaica, at least, we have the Jamaica Psychological Society that can provide a listing of licensed mental health practitioners who can help you with dealing with those emotional hurt and trauma, basically. So I would say seek a mental health practitioner. Look up a psychologist on the Jam Psych website. That's the Jamaica Psychological Society. There's a listing, and this common listing is something that you find across the Caribbean. So you can check your respective psychological society or association for their listing. Once again, I know in JA you have the community mental health clinics. So throughout the communities in our island, you'll find access to mental health practitioners who can provide that support. So you may choose the government support. You might have a little waiting kind of a thing, but some regions are heavily subscribed to in terms of increased clientele. But just check out what the reality is in your ground and you can get. No, we want to say to our churches, yes, to our churches, you play a tremendous role. So we have listeners, viewers, even now. You are a member, active member in your church. There's some level of ministry participation, so that family life ministries, or we can promote wellness, father empowerment, looking at those three P's to empower our males. And so those are two areas I would say how we can get the help. Sure, Mr. Samuel there can add a one or two, and then I come back if time permits.
All right. Thank you, Dr. Winter. So I'm no longer in the Jamaican space. However, there are some things that are universal. And I have always been and will always be a strong advocate for finding a mentor. Um, for me, a male, and I'll speak to my experience, for me, a male figure being a mentor to me is helpful for me. And if it is that you have experienced fatherlessness, I haven't, but if it is that you have experienced fatherlessness, then perhaps it would be beneficial for you as well to seek a mentor who is capable, who is reliable. And I'm not saying to just, we have this saying that we've heard before, never meet your idol because you'll be disappointed. So what I'm saying is this: if you found somebody that you want to be a mentor and you realize that while the process has started, this person is not a good fit for you, it's fine to shop around. It's fine to ask the persons what their credentials are. It's fine to kind of build rapport first, or actually observe the person and how it is that they can build rapport with you before you latch on. But I cannot underscore the importance of mentorship enough. Mentorship is extremely important. Dr. Winter also mentioned the church. And yes, again, there may be instances, as I've said before, where closure is not going to be possible, reconciliation is not going to be possible because the absence is permanent. In these instances, there are spiritual figures who can help guide what channels, what directions are needed to take to get to a place of forgiveness. And that's not something that's going to be rushed. Let me say that first and foremost, that that's not something that's going to be rushed. I also want to pause and say something that just came to mind is that forgiveness is not the same as reconciliation. So forgiving your father for not being present does not mean that, all right, now that I've forgiven him, he will now be a part of my life. No. There are going to be some cases where reconciliation will not be possible. But still, the absence of reconciliation does not mean that forgiveness is impossible or forgiveness cannot happen. Um, I've found spirituality to be helpful in a lot of areas of my life. So forgive me if I'm going to mention it now. That's also a channel that you can access if it is that you are struggling with issues such as these. Uh, Also, clubs. And when I say clubs, like community clubs, like community involvement, service involvement, I've met some of the best mentors in some service clubs that I've been a part of, older mentors who have been able to guide, who have been able to direct. And this is not a plug, but I've been a part of Rotary, and I've met again some of the best and most influential persons. I have also met these persons through churches. I'm going to say spiritual avenues as well. So yeah, these are some resources apart from and yes, I'm going to advocate for mental health professionals, but the realities in some regions is that it's not as accessible as we'd want it to. So these are some alternatives that are there.
Okay, thank you so much, Samuel and Dr. Winter, for that. Just checking in with those persons who are viewing. Do you have any questions? You can post them now, and I'll feed them to our panelists. While we are doing that, there's someone here to share her testimony of having a good father. After which, I'll come back to our panelists for their closing statement. So let's go to, we have Mrs. Jamila McCoy Williams, who I know had a great relationship with her father, and it would be very helpful and add to our conversation tonight so someone can hear from someone who had a father. Go ahead, Mrs. Williams. Tell us about your relationship with your father.
So, good night, everyone.
Good
All
night.
right. So, I don't know if it's fortunate for me, but I would have been blessed to have a great dad, like a superb daddy, my superhero. So, things like growing up, my dad would be he was my first, I would say, first male love. I want to make sure that I say that properly, that it doesn't sound any way, right? But really and truly, he was my first love. Um, Growing up, I remember him telling me how beautiful I am, how intelligent I was. My dad would carry me out on dates, lunch dates. Um, every birthday, we would go on a birthday date, and we would just sit and talk and laugh, and that created such a core memory for me when it came on to dating and how a man should treat me. My father also is one that hold my hand when we're crossing the road and stuff like that. And even now that I am big and married, he does the same thing up to this point. I remember when I was in high school, actually, um, I was at the bus stop, and myself and him and a teacher passed, and she thought it was my boyfriend based on how close. My dad just stood up and, was protecting me. So when I heard the panelists talking about protection and provision, I was just nodding and agreeing to that. In addition to that, when the panelists were talking about just how we see male figures or the father treating mother or wife or the females in the household, I could attest to that as well, because my dad, well, his wife is not my mom, but I would see their relationship manifesting in front of my eyes, and they would have disagreements, but you would never hear it. So, of course, he would sit down with me and say, yes, we do have disagreements, but you never see him disrespecting her in front of us or treating her badly in front of us. And so that has impacted even how myself and my husband now deals with our conflicts and our issues, because of what I would have seen from my dad. My father would have also been someone that never missed a PTA meeting. He never missed a parent review meeting. He was at everything for me. Sometimes I really think that my husband got a spoiled one just because of how my dad treats me. I think sometimes that, boy, me require a little bit too much because of how my father poured into my life. Um, Even now, daily, I get messages. I love you. You are beautiful. You can do this. You will make it through. And so these constant affirmations I am still getting up to now, up to this morning. And if he doesn't send it in the morning, by night, he's sending it. He will send me messages like, you're my inspiration. You give me the reason to live, stuff like that. And that has allowed me to have such a high self esteem, and also just to know my value and my worth, and know that I'm worthy and I'm loved. And I
Wow.
think for me, that is just simply amazing. Yeah, so that's my experience basically, with having a dad that provides, protect, and ensure that I am well. In addition to that, he would have taken on my husband as well in similar light to ensure that he, you know, um, calls him, check in with him, and stuff like that. And then also, I think having someone too that covers all areas. So financially, spiritually, physically. A lot of times when I'm accomplishing certain things in life or making certain steps, I have to call my father to say, I did this, or can you pray for me? And when he does, I feel like, oh yeah, I can conquer the world now. Even today, I recently got something and I called him today and I said, Daddy, guess what? And he just went into praying and declarating over, or giving me declarations because of what I accomplished. And so my experience with that has been so good. because even other female friends that I have, he does the same for them. And I also would have seen him taking on a lot of females and being a father to them. And for me,
Wow.
that's like commendable. I He has someone that lost her dad, and immediately he took her on as his own daughter, and he has showed up for her in so many ways, and I've seen how that has positively impacted her.
Wow. Thank you so much for sharing. I think you just wrapped everything up so nicely that our panelists have explained. And we're really grateful that you could come and say, listen, I am one of the positive ones. I have a positive testimony because there are so many negatives. But I'm very grateful that we have somebody that can come and say, this is my experience and relate to and identify to what the panelists have shared. All right. Thank you so much, Mrs. Williams.
Thank you. And thank you for allowing me to share. Big up Wendell McCoy.
All right. Go ahead. Shout out to Daddy. He deserves it. All right. So we are going to wrap up shortly. So we are going to give our panelists a few minutes each so they can share with our viewers whatever else is laid on their hearts or they would have prepared but have not yet shared. All right. So let's start with Samuel.
All right, so I don't like breaking good flows, and Mrs. Williams, McCoy Williams has done a good way of tying, as you said, Sharika, things together. So I'll just begin by saying I know my father is watching this. I'm aware that he's watching this, and he has been really instrumental in my life. Uh, I will not hesitate, and I don't hesitate to big him up throughout the year, especially this month, Father's Day. He has not only been instrumental in my life and a big part of where I am now and where I will be going, but I've seen his impact on. So he's a deacon at church, and I've seen his impact on the lives of persons in the organizations that he serves. I've also seen his impact at work everywhere he goes. My father is Mr. Calm. My father is Mr. Cool. My father is Mr. I don't think I've ever seen him really angry, to be honest. Yeah, so that's who my father is. And I wanted to take a couple of seconds to highlight that because I want the fathers who are listening to understand that you have a very important role that you are playing. I want to encourage you. At times, you may feel frustrated. At times, you may feel disappointed with whatever is happening. At times, you may feel as if you have the responsibility and the weight of the world on your shoulders. While God has made you with broad shoulders to be able to carry this responsibility, He has also given you a voice to speak and seek help if it is that you do need it as well. So I'd want to say, be encouraged. I'd want to say, persevere. And I also want to say, keep doing the splendid job that you're doing. The world needs you. There's so many fathers who are in prison, who are dead, who are in the cemetery, who are just not there. And we see the impact that it has made. But we also see a lot of persons who have been thriving in life because of the fathers that they have. And I just want to say that if you're one of those fathers on the live, big up yourself.
Indeed, indeed. Well, again, that central theme, or males, or fathers, you have bring forth, you have contributed to the process of life. Hold it and see that special function that you have. Provide, protect, and be the priest, be the leader. Your child is counting on it. Role modeling, emotional regulation, doing well in school, next generation kind of a thing. It's for us, including myself as a father, that constant reminder. Sometimes we drop the ball. Sometimes we have to reorganize our thoughts, reprioritize our doings. But let it be that our children are going to be happy. I think in our Jamaican artists in their song that he mentioned when they asked what he wants to be like. And he said, just like you, my father, because of how the father relate and so forth and so on. So be that model that you want your children, a positive, yes, positive functional model. Provide, protect, and lead priest of your household. That's a call for greater, higher functioning for us as males, as fathers, above all, because there is a difference. Make your own, go forth, and provide that nurturing guidance as fathers.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Winter and Sir Samuel. Well said. Key takeaways. Well, at least for me, we're paying attention to the triple P. Be the priest, the provider, and the protector. And not only that, I'm so happy that Samuel commended the fathers because the truth is, parenting did not come with a manual. So some of you, we are trying to figure it out as we go. But we are encouraged to keep it up. We are encouraged to get help if we need it. Recognize that you need help, seek help, and get help. And not only that, the whole aspect of legacy. We heard legacy and breaking cycles. So if it was done to you, do your very best to ensure that you change the story, that you break the cycle. Don't continue the pattern, right? So we are challenging the men tonight. We're challenging our fathers, those that are already fathers, those that are upcoming fathers, and even those that we honestly can say we're not doing it right. Right? We're not doing it right. It's not too late to start. Because guess what? We want, when we're talking about the echoes of we can say the echoes of father, of having a father, right? We want it to be positive. So thank you so much again, Dr. Winter, and I'm going to say Dr. McDermott. Thank you for coming and sharing with us. We have learned so much. Thanks to my production team who did an excellent job again. And thank you, our viewers who stayed with us. I trust that it was enlightening. I trust that you learned a lot. And I'm just encouraging you to like, yeah, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone that can benefit from the information that was shared. I Evolve has great things coming up. Our devotional will be ready and available June 30th. You know that we are everything concerning evolution, and this is particularly geared towards providing tools and skills and mindset that will help us to evolve and live a life of fruitfulness and fulfillment. It is very different. It is pulling on scriptures, looking at principles that persons in the scriptures would have used to evolve. And so I'm telling you, you definitely want to get it. But secondly, since we're promoting evolution, we recognize that education is a key component in evolution. So what we're doing this year, we are giving a how do I say it nicely? We are assisting persons to evolve by providing grants. So you can head over to our website. Application opens July 1. So the forms will not be up, but you can keep visiting the website for the forms, download it and submit. And you may be one of those persons who are selected to benefit from our grants. All right. So thanks again for your time. Thank you for joining us. Remember to like, subscribe, and share with someone who can benefit from this. See you. Not this month is what? June? July, August. See you again in August for another webinar on mindful conversations. And next month we have Winning Wednesdays. All right. Thanks again, everybody. Thank you for joining. Have a blessed night.
Thank you for tuning in to Mindful Conversations. See you soon as our series continues. Remember to like, share, follow, comment, and subscribe to our social media pages. It's time to evolve for a better